Hello, I'm Sally Brown, Exhibits Coordinator for West Virginia University Libraries. I am honored to have our two panelists today for this program, Annie McFarland and Linda Rosefsky, speaking about collage in conjunction with our exhibit currently at WVU Health Sciences Library of collage work by Corinne Lightweaver, up through May of next year. So I will first turn this over to Linda to discuss the context of collage as art. Linda Rosefsky is an independent scholar, lecturer, and writer. She worked as a graphic artist and illustrator for several years in Southern California until she moved to West Virginia and earned a master's degree in art history at WVU, where she began to teach. She has presented at several academic conferences, and her favorite fields of study are modern art, contemporary art, and women in art. Welcome, Linda. You can go ahead and share your screen.
Hi, Sally. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I've always enjoyed collage art, so I've really been looking forward to being part of this panel today. When it comes to talking about art, I always find it helpful to hear from artists in their own words. Award-winning children's book illustrator Brian Collier once said, "Collage is more than just an art style. Collage is all about bringing different elements together. Once you form a sensibility about connection, how different elements relate to each other, you deepen your understanding of yourself and others." The roots of collage art could be traced back hundreds of years to ancient China, where paper was invented, but it wasn't until the early 20th century when it became a cutting-edge art form, so to speak, with Georges Braque and Pablo Picasso. The term collage is taken from the French word coller, which means to stick together or glue. Around 1910, Braque and Picasso began gathering an assortment of prefabricated items, scraps of wallpaper, magazine and newspaper clippings, fragments of drawings and paintings, and then assembled them on a board or canvas to create fragmented compositions reflecting the time and place in which they lived. Now, seeing mundane, mass-produced, real-world materials like this within a fine art context must have seemed outrageous at a time when audiences viewed canvases skillfully painted with visible brushstrokes, revealing signs of the artist's hand as the highest expression of art in its purest form. This was breaking all the rules. For Braque and Picasso, collage, with its bold references to mass consumerism and crass commercialism, was the perfect medium to mirror the cultural changes that rocked the post-industrial world. These early collages, were mostly based on still life, familiar everyday objects presented in multiple viewpoints atop round Parisian blue cafe tables. It wasn't long until this new and provocative art form attracted a wide array of artists who also reveled in shaking things up and challenging the status quo. After the First World War, collage art became politically motivated, giving artists like Hannah Hawk the opportunity to add witty and often scathing commentary to their work. As a young girl in Germany, she often enjoyed sticking the wrong head on the wrong body in her imaginative, fanciful creations, an artistic device she continued to use throughout her career. Through collage and photomontage, a technique she helped pioneer, Hawk investigated gender roles and challenged the sexism and racism of post-war Weimar German society. When it came to source materials, nothing was off limits. She combined a dizzying array of fashion magazine cutouts, journal illustrations, and photographs, boldly taking on the one-dimensional depictions of women in mass media and film that were so ubiquitous at the time. This politically charged photomontage is Hawk's best-known work. It comes with a long title, Cut with the Dada Kitchen Knife through the last Weimar beer belly cultural epic in Germany. Here, the artist combines a profusion of imagery with references to Weimar society's establishment and anti-establishment figures crowded in and around industrialized chaos. It would take hours to describe this deconstructed and reconstructed world, so I won't. Since I've been invited here to provide art historical context, I feel that it's important to briefly address the worldwide art phenomenon that was Dada. Hock was part of a revolutionary pack of artists and poets who shared a cynical anti-art attitude in their rebellion against war and the society that created it. So, why the name Dada? It sounds like baby talk, da, da, da. The group chose this name because they wanted to be called something as nonsensical as the lunatic horror of trench warfare and the slaughter that occurred during World War I. Their feeling was, humanity's reason gets us into war. Millions died in World War I. Brutality like this is bad for humanity. Why have faith in reason? Reason is what got us into this mess. Dada artists rejected traditional art and embraced the irrational. They were deeply inspired by Sigmund Freud's theories and his exploration of the unconscious mind. Hock considered herself part of the women's movement in the 1920s. She had to fight for her place as the only woman in the Berlin Dada group, one of whom belittled her contribution as, quote, merely conjuring up beer and sandwiches. Cut with the Dada kitchen knife. I doubt that a kitchen knife was used to create this piece. Perhaps this choice of words was meant to be a dig at the male Dada artists who thought her knife skills would be put to better use in the kitchen, customarily the woman's domain of the house. Hock unapologetically sliced through the beer-bloated culture of the Weimar Republic and continued to challenge the status of women in 20th century society through collage and photomontage. Influencing feminist American artists like Barbara Kruger and Cindy Sherman decades later. I'd like to fast forward now and share the work of an artist I follow on Facebook, who creates her images under the pseudonym Mad Collage. Mad as in Madrid, Spain, where she spent her formative years, mostly indoors in a 10th floor apartment. She describes herself then as a fidgety, curious, anxious child who loved playing with everyday objects, making her own toys with cardboard boxes, scissors, markers, and glue. 40 years later, she's still just as creative and inquisitive, but suffers from persistent chronic pain, accompanied by bouts of depression and anxiety because, as she has said, chronic pain doesn't like to travel solo. Well aware of the stigma surrounding mental illness, this artist rejects the notion that it's a subject she should shy away from because it makes people uncomfortable. She creates because she refuses to suffer in silence. I'd like to end with another quote from this artist. I work from personal experience. With each collage, I push back on my own anxiety, my fears, and my feelings of inadequacy. Every image is a stepping stone towards healing. Collaging is an anchoring practice that works for my silly brain. She hopes those with similar issues will find solace in her evocative imagery. It's a hope that I imagine is shared by Corinne Lightweaver, whose beautiful work we're here to explore today. Collage has come a long way as an art form. It speaks to different people in different ways. It has a unique ability to make connections and promote healing. the path to healing can be a long and rocky one. Wouldn't it be wonderful to make the journey together through art?
Thank you so much, Linda. That was amazing.
Thank you.
So exciting.
Thank you so much.
Hannah's like one of my favorite artists. I love Dada.
Me too.
That was a great context. So now I get to introduce Annie to discuss collage as art therapy. Dr. Annie McFarland is a board-certified registered art therapist, art educator, and artist, currently working as an assistant professor of art therapy and art education at West Virginia University. Dr. McFarland currently teaches art therapy and therapeutic arts courses and serves as the coordinator for WVU's art therapy program and therapeutic art graduate certificate program. She has a diverse range of clinical, educational, and research experience, including trauma and PTSD recovery, trauma-informed teaching, and art for self-care and burnout prevention. She frequently uses collage techniques in her teaching and pedagogical practice and with art therapy clients and in her own personal art making practice. Welcome, Annie.
Hi, everyone. Whenever I get to do presentations and there's an art historian involved, I'm always super pumped because I learned so much that I didn't know before. And Dada, like you all said, is one of my favorite movements too. And we talk a lot about Hannah Hawk and her collage work too. My experience too, working in collage, I've always done collage as an artist before I became an art therapist. So it's always interested me. But I think one of the things that's most important about collage, or I find meaningful, is that the image that, like, especially when we're using photographs or magazine images, it's a literal representation, right? And it's something that we kind of can put our associations with. And imagery can be really powerful. So I wanted to start with a little bit of an interactive component. And you can use the chat to respond to this too. So this image here, which hopefully you can see pretty clearly, I'll give you the context after we talk. But if you take a look at this image, which is a magazine image, what kind of adjectives would you use to describe this work? Or this image, I should say. Ooh, broken, fragmented, black and white, ripped, jagged, ooh, duotone, glass, ooh, ice melt, shattered, lonely, wow, okay, yeah, cold. So a lot of these words that are coming up here too really are connected to probably your experiences, kind of the feelings, the emotions that you get when you look at an image. Ooh, broken, sharp, abandoned, floating, tracks. Yeah. So I love this too, because we have some people are thinking more formally, like I know Ashley's an art educator, so you're probably thinking about more of the formal elements too. But it can be both too, right? We can think about formal things associated with an image, but also the feeling or the descriptors that come up too. So imagery can be really powerful. And so I actually used this image. I'm part of my experience, my clinical work was working in hospice and palliative care. And so I did a lot of groups for bereavement, grief and loss. And so I found this image and I thought, what a perfect image to represent kind of people's grief journey. And when I showed it to people that were participating in art therapy groups with me, it was a really positive or impactful reaction too. So I loved this image because of how much emotional experience we can pull from a singular image too. So just one way that an example of how we can use imagery, and this was from National Geographic too. So why should we use collage? There's actually some therapeutic components and reasons to using collage for ourselves. If you're an educator or a therapist, you might work with individuals who say, well, I'm not an artist, I can't do that, right? If you sit down with someone who doesn't consider themselves an artist and you give them a blank sheet of paper, that's a lot more nerve-wracking, if they're expected to draw something from scratch or create something original. The collage materials, especially using magazines, it's a lot less threatening than kind of this original artwork creation. We can pick images that we like. We can tear things out. It's familiar to us too. Although magazines are now becoming more and more scarce, we do have them still. They're easily accessible for a variety of levels too. So whether it's kids, adults, people with physical disabilities too, there's always ways to adapt our materials, adapt things we're using to work for everyone. And in terms of the content and the process in collage, of course, we just saw the visual metaphor. Image can be really powerful. Another thing that struck me too, when Linda was talking too, she mentioned too fragmented imagery in a lot of the collage artwork too. That to me is kind of what I've experienced working with clients in terms of like working in trauma too. Processing these fragmented memories, like the imagery kind of represents or can kind of be similar to these experiences that we hold with us too. So in terms of education components, visual literacy skills, right? Connecting ideas, we're figuring out what images we want, how we want to layer them, the placement on the page, things like that. Another cool thing that can happen too is with collage, I find this in my own process that I don't know what I'm looking for when I start looking through a magazine, but when I see an image that strikes me, I know, yes, I know I have to keep this. I don't know what for yet, but it encourages a very intuitive process. So you can make sense of it during the creation, but you also can just make stuff and then think about it later when you have this finished product too. So meaning can come during that creation of those layers of meaning, but also too after those pieces are put together. So what kind of materials can we use for collage? Linda mentioned some of the classic artists using alternative materials that you don't traditionally think of, but of course, magazines, photographs, scrapbook paper, any types of paper, but even recycled materials can be really awesome to use. Fabric as well. If you, I know I sent away for fabric samples for a couch I was thinking of buying. They send you free samples. And so I have like little squares of fabric that I use in some of my collage work too. But things like old music sheets, maps, old books that aren't being used, you know, as long as you borrow something from someone and they're okay with you cutting it up, then I say it's fair game. So. And there's different ways to kind of approach making collages. So if you've ever done collage yourself, you probably are familiar with these methods. Corinne Lightweaver, who we're talking about today, her exhibit, she has some really great examples of kind of the literal approach and the more abstracted approach too. So I don't know if these are like technical terms, but this is kind of how I've termed the way that I think about doing collage, but we can use the images that we find, images and words as they appear, right? So for example, both of these pieces use maybe forms, images of people, textures, animals, cut out from various sources and put and arranged on a page. So a background, you know, if you have, especially, I just love National Geographic because they always have all sorts of different landscapes and things like that. But you can incorporate whatever you find. So kind of things as they appear that you come into contact with. And then also we can think about using collage in more of an abstracted way. So when you look through a magazine or you have these fabric samples, things like that, you're thinking about how can I use the color and the texture to create something else, right? So Madeline Rector is also a great artist. She does realistic portraits with magazine pieces too. So if you've never seen her work, she's pretty incredible too. But we can use it more abstractly or more formally. You can do both at the same time. Kind of like Dada, there's no rules, right? We can use collage in whatever way we want. I always like to include this too. So we have been influenced, if you've read some children's books, you know, of course, The Very Hungry Caterpillar is a collage art. Eric Carle makes his own color fields and then cuts the shape. So that abstracted approach, he can create these images and some of our most familiar and favorite characters. And also too, I didn't realize until I started researching collage artists, but the snowy day is also collage as well. In the same or similar technique, like the snow is used with different colors of paint. And then of course there's different patterns and textures, the little boys' pajamas too. So lots of things that we think about or we experience in our culture, I love children's books too, but a lot of collage artists are also children's book authors and illustrators. So thinking about my experience working with clients, especially working in trauma, PTSD, things like that, as a therapist, and even as you go through life too. So if you're an educator, whatever your profession is, maybe outside of your profession, we experience situations that sometimes are hard to deal with. We all experience stress. In the art therapy world, we have this this activity we do sometimes that's called response art. So response art, instead of just talking about something, maybe in like a professional support group or a support group that you would normally talk through things, a nice way to kind of process your experiences, maybe some trouble you're having, or maybe those more emotional experiences in therapy as a therapist, is to create art in response to those things. So that can allow us to process and not hold on to the things with our clients too. And I think this kind of approach is useful for everyone, really, but especially if you're in any kind of caretaking role in terms of helping other people. So helping professions like teaching, social work, our first responders, medical staff. Our artwork here that we're talking about, Corinne's artwork, is at the Health Sciences Building, right? I would love to do art groups with all of our medical providers too, that to help with stress and kind of processing our experiences too. So I wanted to share too, as an art therapist, I'm always balancing too my art making and response art as well. The pandemic was a really tough experience for a lot of us. One of my really good friends died from COVID-19. And so one of the only things that I knew to do was to make art about her. So this, I guess, is technically a mixed media piece, but I had some pictures of her saved from Facebook. And so I printed out on my computer, which you can tell is not a very high quality. I think my inkjet might have been running out of ink too. But I found a picture that I liked of her, and I included it in this mixed media piece too. So I used watercolor, crayon, and ink pen too. And I love using like low budget Crayola. This is my favorite brand. I still use that as a quote unquote professional artist to this day too. But for me, this was really important. I couldn't really express how I was feeling, and except for visually in an art form too. So using this process or response art to deal with things in our own lives too. And I loved, she and I would always exchange terrible dad jokes. So I dubbed her the patron saint of dad jokes too. So that was my title for her. And another more recent exhibit, well, I guess it's around the same time too. Right before the pandemic, I was involved in it was an art exhibit and panel discussion. Unfortunately, the panel discussion got canceled when COVID came, but it was about aging and using the arts for aging in those populations. And so my work in hospice care led me to working with a client who was in her 90s, and she was actually formally trained as a painter in the 1940s. She went to school, went to art school, and she got her BFA in painting. But her instructors at that time, talking about cultural movements and kind of reactions to that, it was deemed that women are not painters, only men can do that job. So her instructor in her painting program told her, well, you're never going to be successful as an artist as a woman, right? And so she really internalized that and thought, well, okay, I'll finish this degree, but I'm just going to get married and have kids, and that's my role. So fast forward to me working with her 50 to 60 years later, we really, working with her, she had the skills and she had the talent in her, but she was so hesitant to do art again. And so one of my goals was just to get her back into the practice of art making and working through all those things that she was told she wasn't, right? Because she was a woman. And this was a really powerful experience for me. So I made collage as part of this exhibit too. And so what I did was, to honor her, I had several pictures of her working. So I drew from photo reference her hands in different various pictures. So this was a sketch of her hand drawing. And then because that experience for her happened in the 1940s, I ordered a Life magazine from like 1946 off eBay. And I know that if the person I bought it from knew I was cutting up a vintage magazine, their head would probably explode. But it was appropriate for my work that I was doing here. So I made a set of two collages too that were about her, this client, and kind of her struggle with breaking through this pressure to be a housewife and kind of the expected roles and reconnecting with her artistic self too. So lots of imagery from advertisements and articles there from the Life magazine. I also found some artist postcards. So these are collaged in there as well. The background is handmade paper. And then the whole background too is craft paper. It's the stuff that you wrap mailing packages in and things too. So I think the types of materials that you're using too can reflect the meaning, right? Especially working with older populations, we often in our society think about the older people as kind of, pushed away to retirement homes, things like that. But they have so much life too. I loved working in hospice for that reason. So I saw Claire asked, what size is this? I think it's about maybe like 11 by 14. These images are still, or the artwork still floating around somewhere at the Oglesby Art Center too. So, and this second piece was just using some of these advertisements as well too. But a lot of thinking about kind of her breakthrough, and for my work with her, we were doing a lot of stuff that might have looked more like art education or an art class, when I would come in and work with her. But it was kind of breaking through and really igniting her love of art making again, too. So for me, making these collages in response was really healing for me as well, because that's a pretty intense thing to, hearing other people's stories sometimes as a therapist too. You can get secondary post-traumatic stress or compassion fatigue, things like that too. So for me as an artist and my profession, I love using my art as a way to kind of channel these things and to let go of these tough things that I'm working through. So I think for all of us, you can do this whether you're a therapist or you're not an artist too, especially if you don't think you're of yourself as an artist. Collage is an awesome way to kind of tap into those things. So some different ideas you could do if you're thinking, well, I would love to try collage, but I'm not really sure how I would do that. One project I do with my students in Art 103 is a self-portrait collage. I tell them you're going to do a self-portrait, and immediately all of them panic because they think they're going to have to hand draw something and it's going to look perfect, right? But for me, I define self-portrait as anything that represents or relates to you in your life. So that includes using language, text, letters too. If you can't find the word you're looking for, you can always find the letters and make it. Images, products, food items, whatever it is you can include in a collage. This bottom right one, a student she created an eyeball, and then there's all of within there, it's hard to see, but there's different words that describe her through in that iris that she created as well too. But so that's a great thing to do to kind of process your self-identity. Maybe if you're thinking about goals for the future, a vision board was really popular a while ago too. Making hope collages, people that inspire you, words that inspire you, maybe if there's poetry that inspire you, emotions collages too, right? If there's a certain situation you're going through, making art to kind of process what you're feeling and going through is a great way to do that. So it could be words, color, textures, images, all of those things. And another way that I use collage too is I make tiny pieces of art that I give away, or I call it undercover art experiences. I'll go and put one sticking out of one of the grocery aisles so someone comes upon it too, or leave a piece of art on the gas pump so that someone comes up and little collage pieces. It's like a little treasure too. So connecting with other people too through art is really fun. And collage art, right? You can definitely go to your traditional stores like Michael's, Hobby Lobby, Walmart, Target, anywhere that has kind of scrapbooking stuff. Scrapbooking is great material to use. So paper, stickers, 3-dimensional things, beads, buttons, all those kinds of things. If you're trying to find magazines, doctors' offices, salons, dentists often cycle through. You think about magazines come once a month, and so they're routinely getting rid of magazines as well. And so it never hurts. I'm always the person that's like, can I have these? And are you going to throw these away? I'll take them, or old magazines like old National Geographics, things like that. But I would also highly encourage you to, if you're thinking about collage, I will disclose that this may or may not turn you into a hoarder, because I definitely hoard collage materials, but recycled sources, right? The things that we use every day, cardboard from certain products. If you go to garage and yard sales, any books that might be given away, your office recycling spots, and especially in the Creative Arts Center, I'll show you some examples too of stuff that I've gotten from them. And then also any kind of Goodwill or resale shop, Salvation Army. One of my favorite resources is the Pittsburgh Center for Creative Use. This place is so awesome. They have everything that you could ever think of there in terms of art materials, found objects, old books. They have, when I went there last time, someone had donated an entire stack, I want to say over 100 sheets of geographical surveys from Ohio. So it was these huge map sheets, so all sorts of random stuff that gets turned in. So that is a great place to find some stuff. So I wanted to show you also some stuff that I found recently, that I found like a children's magazine from the 1960s. Like, let's see if I can find a good picture in there. Like, how great are some of these images, like these old vintage classic images, perfect for Halloween time. I found German dictionary, and it's dated like 1940 something. I have no idea what I would use this for, but I was like, I know that I have to have this because I'll find some way to use it. Also, to music sheets, the Creative Arts Center was giving away or getting rid of. They have boxes that you take these or they're going to get thrown away. And so I found like old music scores from like the 40s, right? Look at some of the images there. So really kind of looking around and finding things that you can use that are recycled, old. I mean, it's great to have new stuff, but there's so much stuff out there already that we can recycle and reuse. And another thing too, before I close, was your collage stuff does not have to be 2-dimensional. It can also be 3-dimensional. So this is kind of creepy. I will tell you. I did a workshop with an artist who does paper mache. And so one of the things we did was we made paper mache hearts. So this is like an anatomical heart. And then I put like a hinge on there that I found. And then you can put things inside, right? So I have like a dried out rose and some collage images. I don't really know what any of this means. It doesn't have to be super meaningful either. There was the cactus, so then I put pins in there too, like, ooh, super creepy, right? But that's the cool thing about collage too, is you can make it really impactful. You can make it serious. When Linda was talking about Hannah Hook's work and how she was doing mixing heads and bodies together. I actually had a client that did that in our collage activity group when I was working in inpatient psych. And he said, I just want to make something that's going to make me laugh. That's going to help me get through my recovery. And so he spent the entire hour finding heads and different bodies and putting them together. And we were all laughing at the end of the session because it was so funny, some of the combinations he was coming up with. So you can, that's the beauty of working in collage, is that you can make it as weird or intense or impactful as you want, or you can just have fun with it, make it fun, weird, in a positive, playful way too. So I know I threw a lot of information at people, but yeah, so I'm really happy to be a part of this discussion too. And I hope that you all that are watching this too will take some time and do some collage for yourself, because it can be really fun and therapeutic stress reliever for yourself as well.
Thank you so much. That was fabulous. I love your work. All of the work was so cool. And I'm an artist too. I actually make collages. I didn't prepare anything. But when I was an undergrad, I had a professor, this was in the year 2000, who told me I had to choose between having a family or being an artist. So this was 20 years ago. Luckily, it didn't take me 40 years to get back into art. But anyway, I actually met the artist Corinne Lightweaver through this gallery pen pal program. So it's kind of interesting that you mentioned that sort of exchange of work. Let me share my screen. So you've already seen some of Corinne's work. I'll just let this slideshow kind of play while I read a little bit about her. So she's an artist, writer, editor, and author. Her artistic journey began in painting, with wildlife as her favorite subject, and also included forays into other media like ceramics. Later, she began experimenting with collage and assemblage techniques. In addition to creating artwork, she has curated several art and photography exhibits, written about the process of art making, and edited books and articles on the arts, artists, and art conservation. Her newest art book, which I own, fabulous, The Psyche's Gifts, Art, Art Making, and the Journey from Mental Illness to Mental Wellness, provides an unexpected window into the lived experience of mental illness. Working from her unconscious, Lightweaver uses the techniques of paper collage to access, reveal, and artistically document her journey. Through her work, she hopes to reduce stigma about mental illness and to provoke dialogue between people with mental illness, their loved ones, and the general public. The book is now on Amazon. It's also in our collection, thanks to our arts librarian. And so the exhibition of her work currently up at the Health Sciences Library is called Library, Politics, and Art. Oh my. She's the 2021 Every Library Artist in Residence, and her exquisite collage work is about the, quote, delicate balance between people and nature as part of the story of public, private, and school libraries, unquote. The exhibition of collages, weaving animal imagery with people, domestic objects, and architecture, debuted at Hastings Library in Pasadena, California in 2021. Continues Lightweaver, quote, despite our increasing access to information via Google, there is no substitute for the human touch, for personal consultations with research librarians, for the camaraderie of reading or studying in community, for the gathering of community for cultural celebrations, and for welcoming immigrants to study for citizenship. I use the elements of collage the same way I use paint. I strive for a color balance, a sense of movement, interesting textures, storytelling, a provocation, and an invitation. The latter two are addressed to the viewer, but they also evoke the same in me, unquote. Like I said, the exhibit will be on view through May of next year. And now that you've heard from all of us, I welcome questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute, raise your hand or just unmute. I didn't see any questions yet in the chat.
I actually had a question
Go ahead.
about the sculpture that Miss McFarland made with the paper mache. Is that something that you came up with, or is there somebody, an artist we can credit for that? Because I might actually do one of those because I really like that.
Yeah, when I lived in Tallahassee, Florida, there's an amazing artist. Her name's Linda Hall. Yeah, I'll put her name in the chat. She taught me how to do the paper mache process.
Mm-hmm.
And I did this at one of her workshops. And so, yeah, she does masks and full body costumes and figures. And
Because
she's
my
really,
therapist would love that. Thank you so much for sharing.
Sure.
So somebody put another question in the chat, and okay, I'm going to read it. I'm gathering the healing part of collage can be making something expressive or beautiful from ruins, from fragments, sometimes damaged or broken, and that as humans are naturally damaged or broken by the process of living and time and loss, the process reflects that parts of ourselves can be combined in creative ways to express something new and sometimes beautiful, even in a terribleness such as war and mental anguish. Any thoughts or response? Yes, I would agree.
I would say yes to everything that Beth said. Yes. One of the things too that I was thinking about, like fragments of memory and experience where people are visual, some people are more visual learners than others, but in general, the way our brain works is language and visual processing are different parts of the brain. So like, especially like trauma, those two parts of the brain get disconnected. And so when I work with people doing something like collage, where you can take images and create an image, that starts as a point to start processing and understanding experiences and add that language component back to it. Because sometimes people don't have the words to kind of process or talk about these things that have happened to them. That's, I think, in general for all art making too, is if we can communicate through a visual way, we can get these things out from here and out into an external source that can help us to process these things as well. So
there's another question for you in the chat. Do you want to read it?
sure.
Okay.
Do you find the process of selecting items is as much as part of the therapeutic process as where they are placed on whatever object? Do you find most clients do their collage in one sitting or over a period of time? Do you note any difference in the immediacy of a project as to one developed over time? Ooh, many good questions. Yeah, so the process of picking the images, that can be a really relaxing therapeutic thing that you can do for yourself as well. I would say when I did collage work in hospice care and even in inpatient psych too, it depends on the situation, but if you're thinking about the process of actually going through a magazine and selecting, that takes a lot longer than, for example, pre-cutting images of different topics and then providing them to choose from those things. I've done both. It just kind of depends on how much time you want or you have to use with a client as well. But definitely you can do one sitting, right? And a lot of times it might be finding 3 or 4 images and that's it. But because some of the images are so detailed, or the landscapes, the different words, things like that, that can be just as impactful as one that's over a long period of time. So.
Can I say something? My name is Claire Standish. I'm not an art therapist, art therapy student. I'm a collage artist. I'm in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, just up the road from you all. And I'd like to recommend a book, if I could. It's called Collage Care. The subtitle is Transforming Emotions and Life Experiences with Collage. It's written by Lori Canier, M.A. If you want to send me a message, I'd be happy to give you a link and hook you up with this lady. She wrote this book over the course of several years. I actually have a piece in it, but it's a really, really great book. She took the position that that there are gems to collage. So she has all these different gems that have to do with collage. Well, let me just read a couple. Gems documenting profound connections, communication, illustrating bonds, evaluating relationships, recognizing that you can problem solve. It is a terrific book. I've had it for a couple of years and I'm still, I find all kinds of really, really good stuff in it. So if you want to message me here or on Instagram, I'm at SkippyC5. I'll be happy to connect you with this lady, with the author.
Cool. And you can put her name in the chat if.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
I will.
Thanks.
I will do that.
Sweet.
I will do
I was wondering, Annie, Linda, if you have favorite collage artists, and also Linda, I know you're an expert on Andy Warhol. Did he ever do any collage work?
A lot of his work is very collage-like, putting a lot of different photographs together and creating a silk screen. So not technically cutting magazine pictures out and pasting them and that sort of thing, but there's definitely a collage-like feeling to his work. Absolutely. And of course, all the pop imagery, the soup cans and all the advertising imagery that was so much part of pop art. And also James Rosenquist is another pop artist that I really like. And he actually did work in collage as a starting point to his paintings, which were huge, monumental. And that's where he started, with these little collages of, advertising images and things, and blowing them up. There's one with little images of Little Debbie and spaghetti and real orange sauce, and it's a very famous painting, F111, I think. But yeah.
Annie, do you have a favorite collage artist?
I think in historically speaking, Hannah Hawk is probably one of my favorites, and also Barbara Kruger.
Yeah.
And I don't know, this is kind of a fun fact. I talk to my students about this too. The brand Supreme, if you know that clothing brand Supreme, it's like red with a white logo. They actually used Barbara Kruger's text, like her font and her color scheme. And I read an article that their fashion line was inspired by her collage art. So I thought that was really interesting too. But yeah, I like to, I do a lot of posting on Instagram and looking at artists on Instagram. And there's a lot of people doing some really amazing work that are not, like famous artists. So I wouldn't say I have a favorite. I think there's a lot of people doing lots of different styles, and digital work too. Digital collages too are really big too. So.
Oh, thanks.
What about you, Sally?
Oh, Hannah Hawk for sure. Unquestionably. Does anyone else here? I know we have a lot of creative people in the audience. If anyone else wants to share their favorite collage artist, whether historically or contemporary, you're welcome to share. I see David Hockney in the chat.
Take a look at Lance Lesher. I'll put that in the chat too. There's a really, really good documentary about him called The Secret Life of Lance Lesher. It's amazing. It's amazing. Cool. I'll put it in the chat.
Thanks. Yeah, Martha Rosler, that's a good one. Oh, you just watched that movie. That's cool.
So good.
Any other questions, comments? Moon Jube on Instagram. Cool. I'll have to look that up. We actually hosted a collage exhibit a few years ago called Remix. I will have to find that link and send it when I send my thank you email to you all for coming. Yes, this was recorded and it will be posted on our YouTube page. So if you missed any part of it, I will send it out to everyone here who attended. Any other questions? Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We're going to put a little survey in the chat. If you have a few minutes to fill that out, we'd really appreciate it. And I think Beth already put a bunch of different links to the exhibit, and I'll include those in my follow-up email to you all as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day and weekend.